Welcome to our channel, Psyverge. He who does not punish evil, commands it to be done. It is a great saying by Robert Louis Stevenson that the cruelest lies are often told in silence. There's something about silence that unnerves people, not the silence of a quiet room or the kind that follows a late-night snowfall, but the kind of silence that lingers after something should have been said, the kind that fills the space where truth should have echoed. That kind of silence isn't passive, it isn't peaceful, it's calculated. And in dark psychology, it's one of the most dangerous responses a human can give. You see, we're conditioned to believe that speech is power, that saying something, anything, is the primary way to take control of a situation. But what if the most powerful move is saying nothing at all? That's where the psychology gets dark. Because silence, in the right hands, is not a retreat, it's a weapon, and one of the most effective ones. Philosophers like Wittgenstein argued that what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. But the silence he referred to was philosophical humility. What we're talking about here is something else. This is strategic silence, manipulative silence, a kind of psychological warfare where the absence of words becomes a message louder than any scream. In relationships, silence is often mistaken for peace. People think that not arguing means things are okay. But a lack of argument can mean a lack of care, a disengagement, a decision to stop trying. Sometimes people don't speak because they're trying to avoid conflict. Other times they don't speak because they're waiting for you to destroy yourself. That kind of silence is intentional, and it's cruel. Silence creates a vacuum, and the human brain hates vacuums, so it fills it with anxiety, assumptions, projections. If someone you love goes silent after a fight, your mind starts racing. You rehearse past conversations, searching for clues. You think of what you said, what you didn't say, what you should have said. That silence becomes a mirror, but it doesn't show you the truth. It shows you your fears. That's the real danger. Silence doesn't just hurt, it manipulates. It forces the other person to become their own torturer. Dark psychology understands this. It exploits this. The narcissist who goes silent isn't just tired. They're punishing you, withholding attention, withholding acknowledgement, because silence sends a message that words never could. You don't matter enough to engage with. That's the psychological strike. Not screaming, not rage, but erasure. The cruelest kind of rejection isn't being insulted. It's being ignored. There's an eerie kind of power in refusing to respond, in refusing to validate. Because silence removes your opponent's ability to mirror themselves. And without that mirror, people spiral. That's how abusers control. That's how cults isolate. That's how institutions punish dissent without leaving a bruise. They don't yell. They go quiet. They turn their back. And in doing so, they turn your mind against itself. Now, from a philosophical angle, let's look at silence through the lens of existentialism. Think of Sartre's idea of bad faith, the way people deceive themselves to avoid the weight of freedom. Silence can be an escape into bad faith. When someone refuses to respond, they're refusing responsibility. They're refusing to confront, to engage, to acknowledge reality. That silence isn't just harmful. It's cowardly. It's a retreat from the moral obligation to speak, to act, to be honest. But that's not always how silence is used. Sometimes it's not cowardice. Sometimes it's control. A silent person isn't always avoiding. Sometimes they're watching, calculating, letting you reveal yourself. And that makes them dangerous. Because you never know what they're thinking, what they're planning. You talk and talk and talk, hoping for feedback, validation, confrontation, something, and you get nothing. Just a void, just quiet. That kind of silence makes people desperate. It makes them unravel. And that's when they're easiest to control. In power dynamics, silence is dominance. Think of interrogations. The person who speaks first loses. Think of job interviews. The longer the silence, the more uncomfortable you feel. And the more likely you are to fill it with weakness. Confession. Over-explanation. In business, negotiation experts know this well. Whoever can sit in the silence the longest wins. It's strange, isn't it? that something so empty can be so full of meaning. But that's the paradox. Silence isn't empty. It's dense. It carries weight. It's loaded with implications. And unlike words, silence can't be taken back. Words can be misinterpreted. Silence can't. Because it's a blank screen where the other person projects all their fears. Silence can be love, sure. A moment shared between people who don't need to talk. But this isn't that kind of silence. This is the silence of withdrawal, of emotional starvation, of ghosting. This is silence used to avoid accountability, to dodge questions, to make someone feel small. It's the silence you get after calling out abuse, after exposing hypocrisy, after speaking your truth, because people don't always argue with what threatens them. Sometimes they just pretend it never existed. In family systems, silence is often passed down like a disease. The unsaid becomes tradition. Trauma becomes legacy. Things aren't talked about. Problems aren't confronted. And generations grow up learning that silence is safety. But what it really is suppression. And suppressed things don't disappear. They just metastasize into anxiety, into addiction, into resentment. That's the cost of silence. It doesn't heal, it hides. Look at totalitarian regimes. They don't just censor words. They censor silence. Because silence from the wrong people becomes resistance. That's the flip side. Sometimes silence is the only protest left. When everything you say is used against you, silence becomes defiance, a refusal to cooperate. But that kind of silence is dangerous for a different reason. Because it threatens control. And anything that threatens control is punished. Silence is never neutral. It's always a message. The question is, who is sending it, and why? Sometimes, silence is wisdom. Sometimes, it's fear. Sometimes, it's a slow poison. In toxic dynamics, the person who controls the silence controls the pace of the relationship. They dictate when communication happens, when it stops, and who gets to feel heard. That kind of control doesn't require shouting. It just requires strategic withdrawal. Now consider gaslighting. One of its most powerful tools is silence. The silent treatment isn't just passive-aggressive. It's designed to make you question your worth, to punish you without laying a hand on you, to create a kind of emotional purgatory, where you're never sure where you stand. That uncertainty is intentional. It's psychological warfare in its purest form. People often say, silence speaks louder than words. That's only true when you understand the language of silence. But not everyone does. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because people don't see it coming. They don't know they're being manipulated. They just know they feel anxious, unseen, off balance. That's the silent damage silence causes. You can't see the wound, but it bleeds anyway. In moments of crisis, silence can feel like betrayal. Think of whistleblowers ignored, victims silenced, injustice met with shrugs. There's a moral cost to silence. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And he was right. Because silence condones. Silence enables. Silence is complicity dressed in neutrality. In dark psychology, silence isn't just a response. It's a tactic. It's an emotional scalpel. Clean, sharp, and quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't warn. It just cuts. And often, by the time you realize what's happening, the damage is already done. So the next time someone goes silent, don't underestimate it. Don't romanticize it. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself what message their silence is sending. And if you're the one staying silent, ask yourself what you're avoiding. Because silence doesn't mean nothing. It never has. In the right or wrong hands, it means everything. And it may just be the most dangerous response of all.